Buonasera.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting. In this session we're going to talk about us. We're going to talk about the recent months that are radically changing our life. They have changed so many things, our way of being together, our way of working, our way of learning. They are introducing new terms into our vocabulary, terms and phrases like distant learning or smart working have become commonplace in our ordinary way of speaking. So we are using new words, and this very new meeting is in a new digital format. We are online or on live basically, because at this stage it is really impossible to divide the two realities, in other words, the physical dimension and the digital dimension. Hence the title of this evening, which is based on this new discovery. Our life is on life, and this is an expression, this is a phrase that has been invented by one of our guests this evening, connected from London, Professor Luciano Floridi. There he is. Welcome. Good evening, Professor Floridi. He is Professor of Philosophy and Ethics of Information at the University of Oxford. He's one of the most careful observers of the infosphere of the digital information. The infosphere, because we're living in a new world, and he's also the very same creator of this new phrase, which basically well binds these new realities on life. And then we have another guest present with us today. He is an analogical guest, let's say, who is Professor Costantino Esposito, a dear friend of the Rimini meeting, who has been present here for many editions. He is full professor of the history of philosophy at the University of Bari, and he is here in presence, as he has done so many times in the past. Professor Esposito and Professor Floridi have known each other since long ago, and actually this evening's session attempts to try and investigate the new experience we're now going through, that kind of mixes these new experiences we're living. I would like to ask a question to Professor Floridi to start with. What does it mean that our existence is increasingly on live? And is the pandemic accentuating this dynamic? Has it kind of boosted the merger between the two dimensions? First of all, thank you very much for this kind of invitation, and also for bringing me together with Costantino. I promise I'll be present in person next time for the next edition of the Rimini meeting, if the pandemic allows us. So the Onlife is a very nice word. I'm happy that it has become very successful. This is not exactly what we're going through today, because over the last few months we have lived almost entirely online. So the biosphere has not been gentle to us, and so we kind of withdrew ourselves into the digital world. We started learning and working from home. We kind of socialized without being physically present. Onlife, conversely, is ideally the way we should look at the future and face the future. We should mix well the two dimensions, the physical analogical dimension. Costantino mentioned this term, analogical, and then the digital, so the online and the offline. And mixing the two terms in an intelligent way lies the key for the recovery of the next few years. So we should not be excessive, we should not exaggerate with the online, and not should we do with the Onlife. We should not exaggerate also, because sometimes there are people who say that the virtual world is better, but this does not have a sense. From a professional or learning point of view, we should basically get the most out of the two aspects. And it seems to me this is one of the most interesting challenges that we are confronted with, especially in Italy, where the pandemic has created so many sufferings. Italy has proven that we've been up to the challenge, and I believe we can even be up to the next situation in bringing together the analogical and the digital way in a fruitful way. A question to Costantino Esposito now. Are we learning anything from this new dimension? I think there is some kind of a balance that we need to recover and that we need to stress again, something different. I think this poses a major philosophical issue, and probably I think it would be interesting to exchange views with Luciano. We have a massive flow of information and an amazing variety of forms of communication. Is this our way that we use to relate to the world, or is this the world? I'm asking this because very gradually it seems that the Onlife, of course, recently we've mostly been on our online dimension, but we sincerely hope that the two spheres start being entangled again. So very soon, within this digital habitat, where we are constantly connected, and here there can be a problem. Is this our way of understanding the world? Is this our way of accepting the reality and the circumstances, whatever they are? That is the very same experience of distant learning, not only in terms of practice, but also from an epistemological point of view. What kind of lessons can we learn, not only through this tool, but through this mode, in this new mode? So concerning this new way of managing information and relations between us, is this new mode a possibility to understand more the world, or is it the world? Is it our way? Is it the objective that we have to kind of conform the world and shape it based on these new technical realities? I think that the answer to this question is very much related to the answer to your question. What can we learn? What lessons can we learn? In the first case, if this is a possibility that we have to better understand the world, well then, this is a really thrilling experience. So in this case, new technologies can help us discover dimensions of sense and of meaning and the potential of reality that were not so known to us. However, if that is the world, if we need to rebuild the world and identify the world with these new possibilities, well then we might be bound to learn less. Well, probably I think I've thrown too much food for thought. Well, you said something very wrong, because we're talking about two interpretations. I agree with you. I agree with you on the fact that you have this twofold character. One is more epistemological and the other one is more ontological. I wouldn't actually say that each condition kind of dismisses the other. It's both. It's not either or, but it's both. Let us make a reference to Galileo Galilei. Galileo used to say that the world is written with the symbol of mathematics. So the digital dimension only adds a chapter to that word. So we should not wonder whether that is the world, because we're talking about the whole world and then there's an additional chapter. But simply saying that that chapter is just a way to understand the world, but not part of the world, not a reality, or not something that we are faced with. I think that is also excessive, and probably that's too much of a reduction. That's too much of a limitation. I would also say that in terms of experience, for example, in the 1990s, we made a huge mistake. This technology, especially the internet and then the web and then the social media, these are things that are often said, they've been considered as forms of communication, as if the digital world were some kind of a Gutenberg Galaxy 2.0. The very same Umberto Eco used to say that, but I don't think it is the case. This is not the case. The digital world is not only something more than communication, but that's a real environment. And that is the reason why today we have problems related to those who dominate this environment. When Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook says that we have to treat him as if he were halfway in between the news and a telephone company, because he's known of the two, but he's halfway between kind of the square and the park of a given city. So he created a space, and we spent some time in that space. So spending our own time in a space, of course, requires a huge effort. This requires a huge philosophical effort in terms of interpretation, conceptualization. So we need to pay a lot of attention in order not to misunderstand things. And there is the temptation not to have, not to identify. I mean, we should pay attention not to identify communication in the digital world with communication, because there are a whole series of issues like those related to privacy, for example, which might in a way not be considered. We're talking about an environment and not a form of communication. So in this environment, do the fundamentals between our human relations change? Do they have an impact? Does the new environment have an impact on our way of communicating, and how? Well, actually, our relations change a lot. They change to a great extent. I'll give you some examples. One concerns friendship and then death, especially other people's death. The digital world is radically changing these two dimensions. This is still something that is not yet part of our daily experience, but I mean, it's just a matter of a couple of years. There are a series of industries which are currently developing and organizing themselves for the management of data of those who are now dead. So the so-called digital rests, so to say, have to be regulated. My research group, for example, submitted a proposal according to which we have to work on the analogical world, so that the code that, for example, officials have for the management of deaf people have to be brought hand in hand with online rests. There are lots of articles that I receive as a director of a magazine on philosophy, which concerns the concept of online friendship. For example, I think this is an open debate, but my impression is that this cannot be simply solved by saying yes or no, but this is more a matter of saying, we have to say how one can be friends only online without ever meeting ourselves. Me, myself, I have had experiences with collaborators for years, and I've never met that person physically. And actually, after some time, we felt that we would know each other very well. So, Costantino, what are the characteristics of the friendship? Friendship is something broader. It refers to a special form of relation with the human being. We're not talking about something alternative. This is a new modality. What are the characteristics of this new form of friendship? Actually, what Luciano said is a useful stepping stone for me to comment on my topics. Actually, you talked about the digital rests, the digital remains. A person does not only leave a memory of his or herself written in a will or some kind of an exhortation to his heirs, but actually this person leaves some performance, and they might be even planned beforehand. Or, for example, when talking about a digital friendship, is it real friendship? Of course, you can look each other in the eyes, but the immediacy or the intuitiveness, is it the same thing online and offline? And then the main example is that of sex, digital sex. And what you have told us gives me the chance to clarify what I would like to say. Personally, I'm not afraid of the digital world. Somehow I am very grateful to artificial intelligence. I am an enthusiast when it comes to the facilitations and the openness that this has created for our work. I mean, for those who do our work, I mean, having online libraries is something fantastic. However, this might be a problem, and in my opinion, this is not even so much the problem of kind of posing limitations to the indiscriminate use of these tools. We should understand who the subject is that uses this tool. Or we should understand who the person is who actually inhabit this environment. And we know very well that the natural environment, so the geographical environment where we live, really shapes us. At the same time, we also know that there's something of our experience that is not and that cannot entirely be reduced to the fact that we were born in a given time and in a given place. Of course, that's important because we are not abstract beings. However, there is something that can be reduced, and as a matter of fact, we can oftentimes modify our environment. We can even improve it. For example, I come from Puglia, and there are special walls that remind us of ancient times, wild ancient times, and in those places you can even have a line of stones for a wall, and you understand that that is not natural. That is something that pertains to a technical agent behind. So the real problem here does not lie so much in limiting the activities and having simply and only ethical preoccupations. This is a problem that pertains to the subjectivity. Let's assume that you have someone who can, in a way, meet his or her erotic or sexual consultation needs simply by choosing the types of person, or types of individual that actually meet his needs the most, that are more in line with his needs. Somehow, with technological devices, this person can even meet his or her needs. But the real problem here is not so much that such a behavior is not morally or ethically acceptable. The problem lies in the fact that this person's desire is no longer there. This ultimately ends up in sadness and boredom. So technologies can allow us to do prohibited things, but the fact is that the agent that inhabits this environment sometimes is missing. And what do we know? Well, what do we need in order for this player who inhabits this environment to live in the environment? In other words, what do we need in order not to be afraid of this environment? I think that fear and also some of the things that we keep on saying, we who are slightly older than the others keep on saying will gradually become outdated. like those who once were used to carriages with horses and then ended up to see cars on the streets. Today, young generations, well, they're not born differently than ours, but they will have customs and expectations different than ours. I've never seen a world without cars, and my students have never seen a world without Google, Twitter, or Facebook, or without smartphones and so on. I mean, the digital dimension is a reality, is a consolidated reality today. We sort of landed in this new continent, but the landing has taken place. So similarly with cars, this is for my father and my grandfather. I mean, they had different models, but the surprise was not there. So from the point of view, from a generational point of view, I think that the human being who will inhabit these spaces, and here again, I think I agree with Costantino, will always be a player who will always be in between, because we are analogical, we're made of our own body, and this player will have to deal with forms of capacity that will basically be entirely digital. So using the term agency, if you use Netflix, you're dealing with a digital agents, the recommender systems, who are entirely and ontologically digital. They basically do everything, and they are the real fish, and I am the diver. So I remain analogical. And I would like to make an analogy in this respect. I need oxygen to breathe. My recommender system doesn't need oxygen. So back to your question, what should we do to prepare future players? Well, first of all, we would need some memory, because that is rapidly disappearing. What the world was, what the analogical world was, will disappear. This is something that nobody will remember in terms of life learned. So the world will have always been digital. So some memory to pass and to pass over to our heirs is also important. Memory is important. And also the possibility to navigate. So the ability to be present in this room in a slightly more intelligent way, in a more critical way. So in terms of fake news and inability to manage one's own identity, or sharing wrong information, or the sharing of personal elements, they should remain such, they should remain personal. So once again, these are habits and ways of living that we have developed for ages in entirely different environments. So in this new environment, I hope that we will be able to refine them. While past transformations of agents that changed with us and what it caused and brought about in our subjectivity, while they enabled us to have more time, in the digital world, this is something that is happening very quickly. And here lies the extraordinary. So we just have one generation or two, not so much. So those who are in charge of training, therefore, professors in this respect, have an increasingly difficult task. They have more responsibilities because the training of their students will have to take place very rapidly. So we have the need to move very quickly, very rapidly. Against this backdrop, what kind of challenges are we confronted with? Does this, in a way, broaden the number of questions we are posing ourselves? Or are these questions limited only to the need to use these tools, or are more acute and deeper questions emerging? Is the phenomenon we're talking about a phenomenon that accentuates the need for meanings, or is it just limited to learning how to master new modes and new skills that are kind of offered to the transformation we are living in? First a question to Costantino Esposito and then Professor Floridi. Luciano before said that we need to preserve some memory. We know that memory for us who are basically in between the analogical world and the digital world, well, for us, memory is the key word of our computerized machines. But actually, you talked about something that has nothing to do with this memory. In the pure digital world, having memory of storing of storing experiences, but rather you have to, your task is to basically create experiences from scratch, and so experience has to be made entirely artificial. So this means that we have to look at the reality and at this new reality without being afraid of it. So looking at these possibilities only in the Elon Musk style, as if they were our new El Dorado, as if they are the possibility of making humans experience. Well, in fact, this only but kind of cancels our human dimension. This is a post-human dimension, transhuman dimension. So this is a significant opportunity for us to understand that the other side that we have of the possibility that we are the masters of our experience, this deprives us of something that is really very important for us. Like the title of the meeting says, it deprives us from the possibility of something that is different from us. So this otherness, I hope, can be like the millennium bug of the new digital. So the bug of the new digital millennium. So we have a need, and that need is constant. It is an ontological, deontological, existential way. It's an existential will to be ourselves, because sometimes we discover this world and we discover that there is something else, that there is someone else, and without this other we could not be ourselves. So what I find really dangerous but at the same time very fascinating is the fact that the complete digitalization that the world is aiming at has an objective, which is that of erasing the otherness, eliminating the otherness. It's not only the old Renaissance idea of man who basically is the measure of everything, so can be the one and only to decide over his future. We know that there was always be the big foreigner, so to say, death or luck, that would in a way go against this project. But now it seems that with the transhumanist movement, it seems that this otherness, well, the end can be kind of rounded up and reabsorbed. We can make all the experiences we want, but we will never be ourselves without the other. And there will always be, as you said before, this project of power. The project of a power which might be a devil's power or a good power, but irrespective of the nature of this power, this is a power that has to deprive me of my biggest competence, which is being competent of another person, a person who's other than me. And this means being free. So the possibility of being not only ourselves. If you're dealing with someone who's telling you, I can be you, but better than you do, because I remove the otherness from you, so that you can then self-manage yourself. So once again, this is something that is not frightening, but it kind of forces me to understand the greatness of my freedom and my reality, and to try and ask the digital world not to eliminate it, but rather to help me live that dimension more intensively.
Tap.
So, is there any room for amazement, wonder, and freedom on such an online life? Well, I don't know if I really got what Costantino wanted to say, and maybe the digital world can flatten out things and make things homogeneous. I mean, this is normal. It's like a sort of game of mirrors, simply trying to reproduce ourselves through several channels and devices that are comfortable to me and convenient to me, that somehow amplify my ego. I don't want to overinterpret what Costantino said, but, well, if this was his point, certainly this is a risk. But at the same time, the very same digital world allows me to come across things that would have been inaccessible to me if I had been forced to be stuck in a place and maybe marry the girl next door, born in the same village. So, I mean, the analogical world did not give us so many possibilities. This is a fact. So, allow me to envisage a sort of dynamic that makes the most of the two worlds, and so that it is up to the subject. So even in the poorest outskirts, you can get access to things. So the digital world is not just a bubble, it's not just a set of mirrors or a celebration of the self. Not at all. It's the possibility to have everything at a click distance. I can come across worlds and people and things and realities that otherwise I would have never been able to meet and see. So it's not a either or situation. So, I mean, we should make the most of it. There is a variety of possibilities that are opened up by this world. So I don't know if Costantino agrees with me, but I think that certainly there is a high level of individual and cultural responsibility of the self and of the us. So we are responsible. Each one of us is responsible. Individual choices, of course, can also be sustained by the society we live in. And let's go back to some pragmatic aspects. In our society, there are millions of people following influencers that talk about, let's say, quite silly things or not so important ones like shoes or restaurants or makeup, food. Well, this is an issue because in this case, I'm afraid of such a world. This is the kind of digital world I wouldn't like to see because that reminds me too much of some dystopic science fiction films where, I mean, people are just subjugated by entertainment. So it's a form of somehow destruction of the other that is not imposed or brought about by violence and force and domination, but actually it's like making people being distracted and forget about the rest because they're too much distracted by entertainment. So this is a scenario under the horizon that scares me to death. Professor, what about the rediscovery of some keywords that mark our cohabitation settings? So memory, experience, social fabric are referring to a book of yours that is available on the Book Corner podcast as a review. It's called The Green and the Blue, and the subtitle is Naive Ideas to Improve Politics. So somehow you talk about these topics and how to face them together. Well, why do you talk about naive ideas? Well, maybe it's a bit self-pretentious as a concept, because I'm talking about not a starting sort of naive state, but it's a sort of a status and condition to achieve. And I want really to be clear about the fact that it's the ingenuity that you need to go back to some sort of childish state. So, and I must say that I'm quite agnostic. So my wish is to go back to some sort of ingenuity and naive condition, because there are some things that today are considered as stupid or self-evident. If you talk about good politics, people say, oh, are you still so naive? Or maybe people think that good politics is impossible because there's always a hidden purpose, and so they do not believe in good politicians. Well, in the book, I try to share my view about politics, and one of the key words that maybe it would be nice to talk about tonight is solidarity, and then friendship and love. And talking about love today is something daring. Is it possible to talk about love today? Oh yes, it is possible again. So it's not that we never left Ithaca, but we want to go back to Ithaca. So, well, that's the kind of wonder I'm talking about, because it's so sad to lose Ithaca. So, I don't know, it's like going back to some sort of lost status. That wonder, that amazement should remain in your blood. But the world is not designed to keep amazement alive, but instead to squeeze you, to crush you, to annihilate you. But how is it possible? I mean, what about pleasure and well-being and prosperity? What in other contexts I called as the technology of hope. So the concept of hope has been somehow projected only on material objects and goods, like a new iPhone, a new car, or a house. So that kind of hope and wish just destroys amazement and wonder. Costantino. What about hope, as Professor Floridi said? So, has hope been reduced to something else? However, hope is a radical position in the Onlife world. Is the digital world using eternal categories that are most theological ones, but they are somehow being estranged and changed in their original meaning? But there are some words and concepts that have some level of fascination and some sort of eternal meaning. What about the word hope? What's the meaning of hope in the Onlife world, in the Onlife life? Well, certainly, and we're all involved and concerned and affected, the technological possibilities amplify and somehow increase the hope that the world is more controllable, is more accessible, can better matches our expectations. As it's as simple as that. We have the impression to have all the means we want. When I was a child, I used to dream about the possibility to see my friend was, I don't know, in the United States simply by switching the TV on. But today we can do it. We can call people all over the world for free through applications like WhatsApp. So the world is at hand, the people are at hand, but technology is a sort of messiah-like promise by itself. And this is something that is absolutely poignant. And we were made to enjoy life and the world, to be happy and to fully experience everything we want. We were made and designed to fulfill our wishes, and somehow technology seems to show us that all that is possible. But the price to pay for that is there as well. And this is not because technology is mean or is evil. It's like a temptation, it's like a shortcut. We want to be happy without ourselves, without understanding that technology can give us everything, but it's still too little. It's not enough. This everything is not enough, because there is something, and I link up with the topic of love. Let's take love experiences. So there is myself that relates to a you, and this is something that is unequaled and unparalleled, because we used to think that when we are in love with somebody, all the rest seems to be meaningless. So this awareness of the importance of somebody else is somehow a sort of state and condition that we would like to feel forever. And it's a very intense condition. And I wanted also to go back to something else Luciano said. The people who are using these possibilities may encounter a problem. This is an ethical issue, but also an educational, ontological issue, because what is really at stake here is to teach people how to use these technologies without losing the sight of some key questions. And Luciano wrote a beautiful book entitled Thinking About the Infosphere, and it really talks about the way to ask questions, because technology can give us answers provided that you ask the right questions in the right way. There are no useless questions, not at all. The problem is to learn to ask questions, to understand, then to understand the answer. In order to understand how to respond to what you said, is that we need to understand who are the people who use these technologies, who inhabits these digital spaces. So the real problem is not the place, it's not these sort of walls, but those who use them. And this is the biggest educational challenge. It's not about telling young people, oh yes, you can use the technology and the internet, but please do not visit certain sites. But that would be pathetic. I mean, they should try to cultivate and nurture other skills. So they need to understand that technology can give us all, and that this all always seems to be not enough. The digital world can give us a lot, but not everything. It's indefinite. But what we strive for is infinity. Professor, please, another few words about this word hope. Hope illustrates very well the idea you expressed of the need to reconstruct the social fabric. And hope seems to be a pillar, a backbone. Hope seems to motivate much more than reasonableness and trust. So what can generate hope? In your experience, what can let us nurture hope? How can we avoid that condition that and Costantino Esposito said? So the hope is about a wish, is about something we would like to strive for. The greater the hope, the greater the wish, the greater, all in all, the wishful thinking. But again, wishful thinking can end up in illusions. And so, for instance, hoping to win the lottery is not hope, it's a delusional thought. But still, when I talk about hope today, I'm talking about some common hope, a sort of collective hope. And historically, for some deep reasons, we left behind us a 20th century that individualized hope in its second half. So in the 20th century, and in particular in the second half of the 20th century, individuals have been emphasized as subjects and also as hope bearers. Well, maybe Europe is an exception because the hope for peace, to create a space of peace, was a collective goal. But if you take even Italy, we see that our society is individual-centered and individual-oriented. But the sense of my book is that today we can start hoping together again as a community. Sharing some hope is something great because we can somehow strive all together for something. And sometimes hope can become consensus. There's a fine line between these two. What is this, hope for? What are we hoping for? But as Costantino said, today we all talk about the society based on information. But again, we need to consider the current situation. The self is a result also of its existence in society, so within a community. So there is the self that is also influenced by its presence in a society, and our society today seems to be digital-centered. But then, if as a society we can share some hope, as a society we can share goals, is it possible that then, just a bunch of large companies are the only ones that can control the digital tools that seem to be so important for us? So we need really to create a better society by opening up the field. So to me, the frustration is that there would be a theoretical possibility to have a more plural society in this sense and avoid the superpower of a bunch of few companies. Well, you touched upon a very important issue, because if we consider some recent ideological projects, but also some more moderate projects, always stem from the idea of reaching out for something, striving for something, achieving a goal. And it's so easy then to divide people when you adopt such an approach. And I think that in the political world, but not only in the political world, but most in the political world, when it is about the peaceful cohabitation between and among people, we should and could start nothing but from amazement and gratitude, because we are there. And it's a lot. The fact that we are there is a big result. We came to this world, we somehow ended up here, and this is something that is not to be taken for granted, not at all. Hope and solidarity, also at political level, are a key issue, and also how the COVID emergency is another key element. I remember at one point the huge debate about nurses and doctors and paramedics, and they were overwhelmed, but they said, we are there and we cannot pretend we are not there. But then they were absolutely zonked, and we would really like to go back to another condition, because amazement should become our primary horizon before rage, before complaining, because otherwise, without wonder, we cannot simply exist. Thank you very much. We're very grateful to you, and it was beautiful to delve into this digital world, this Onlife world. We went through some keywords of the meeting: hope, vision, trust, and we ended up with wonder. And again, this was wonderful to somehow decode our reality with these keywords. I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very good meeting. All the best. Thank you, goodbye.